Good morning. So this is my presentation over Dora Ratjen. And throughout this presentation, I'll be referring to Dora as a she, her. This is what she referred to herself as in the interviews. So I'm trying to stay consistent with what she has labeled herself. However, it is important to note that these interviews took place before Dora legally transitioned. And so it is possible that they go by other pronouns now, but for the sake of being as consistent as possible with what they've labeled as themselves, I will be referring to her as she, her. And so Miss Dora is pictured right here. And then she is also in the lineup down here. She scored fourth, and so she's down here at the bottom. And then this is her competing up here as the top as well. A little bit of background information on Miss Dora. She was born in 1918 in a small town outside of Berlin, Germany, and she was raised as a female with two other sisters. Their household would be considered extremely heteronormative. They had a mother and a father, as well as the father's grandparents to take care of. And again, she was raised as the oldest of three daughters. Later on in her life, in 1936, she competed in the Berlin Olympics and the Summer Olympics as a women's high jumper. And so this is a very important note about this is 1936 is in the middle of the Hitler Nazi Germany phase, which is going to be very important for our story. As with all good things, Miss Dora could not be simply an amazing athlete. There had to be a scandal that went wrong. So I'm going to watch a short video here that's going to introduce us to the scandal that Miss Dora Ratjen underwent after her appearance in the Berlin Olympics. As you can see, this video has labeled her a cheater, and we'll talk about whether or not that's true a little bit later. But please keep in mind that cheater may not be the right word for her as we describe and watch this.
Number 1, Dora Ratjen. At the 1936 Berlin Games, Dora Ratjen came fourth and went on to win the gold medal in Europe Athletic Championship, breaking the record of high jump. But it was later discovered that Dora had an advantage over the other women. Dora was a man, and there was confusion at birth as his genitals were very small and he was raised as a woman.
Excellent. And so, as I said, there was a lot more going on behind this as well. And so let's talk about what was actually happening. So behind the scenes, it was 4 years after Dora had competed in the Berlin Olympics, and then she was simply walking around and she was just doing her thing. And she was stopped by police officers. And this interaction ended up escalating where she was threatened to be searched in a strip search. And obviously Miss Dora knew if they looked at her genitals, there may be some issues because she did report having severely abnormal genitals. And so at this threat, she decided that it was best to fully declare that she was not a woman. So instead of them finding out for themselves, she did have the option to take power into her own hands and admit that she was not fully a woman. And in fact, she was born with ambiguous genitalia, which we would label as an intersex condition. When her parents were interviewed about it, they were asked if they were aware of this, and they said that all they could remember was at birth, the doctor asked them to perform a type of surgery to clear up some inconsistent factors in Miss Dora. They never clearly specified exactly the change that they were going to make, but the parents did know that a change was going to happen. The big scandal in all of this is everybody thought it was a ploy. Everybody thought Dora had done this on purpose because, as I said, we're in the middle of this Hitler and Nazi phase in Germany, and they think that that Hitler has come in and said Dora has to compete as a woman so that she can beat all of these people. And while this could be very possible, we know that this happened with other athletes as well. It's important to note that Miss Dora only got fourth place. She wasn't competing necessarily to win. And even in interviews afterwards, she said that her focus wasn't on winning. She was excited to be able to represent her country in the Olympics and wasn't concerned about the aftermath or what her genitalia looked like when she did it. And so there's still a lot of controversy over if this was something that happened on purpose. or if it was something that truly was an accident. Again, Miss Dora was raised as a woman her entire life. And just now in the Olympics, 4 years after, they're coming and saying, hey, she's not actually a woman. And so I wanted to include how Ratjen felt whenever she was going through all of this. A lot of times I think we have the natural intake to avoid understanding what the individual felt like. So I included a couple of quotes here from some interviews she did a year or so after the whole scandal and the whole reveal about her actually being a woman. And as you can see right here, this photograph was taken on the day of this interview. So this is after she's come out and said, I'm not fully a woman, but you can see that she's very much still expressing herself as a woman. So this is how she felt. From the age of 10 or 11, I started to realize I wasn't a female, but a male. I never asked my parents why I had to wear women's clothes, even though I was a male. And so we, from this statement, know that she's felt this way for a really, really long time. And I think this plays a lot into the emotional trauma that's felt by people who are forced into an identity that's not necessarily theirs, whether it be by doctors or by their parents. In this case, it was by doctors, but Dora knew that she wasn't a normal female. While she chose to express herself as a female, and in this quote, it says that it expresses that she didn't really get that choice as a young person, while she continues to express herself this way, she always knew that there was a part that she didn't quite understand. And that's a really big burden for someone who's 10 or 11 years old. The second quote here actually comes from her brother. Oh, sorry, my apologies, not her brother, from her father, who wasn't able to be with Dora when she was arrested. And he said, although one might think that Dora was reluctant to speak of this, it was noted in the police record that she showed honest relief for finally being able to address the issue which had forced her to conceal her true identity. And when I read this quote, I thought about a lot about Billie Jean King that we just talked about. When she was outed as being gay, the same sensation was reported, that feeling of absolute relief and being able to actually come to terms with who you are instead of having this forced identity shoved down your throat. So I thought that this was an excellent note as to how she was able to move on and transition us into the consequences of what happened afterwards. So after all of this goes down, a police physician has to be brought in, and they ask Dora to completely strip so that they can view her genitals. And then they also run a sequence of other tests to examine if she is female or male. And so the conclusion was that she was fully male in the terms of secondary sex characteristics. So she adopted the deeper voice. She adopted the significant amount of facial hair, stuff like that. She was shaving often. And so as a result of this, they took all of her titles, including some victories she had before the Olympics, away. They just stripped all of them, and all of her hard work was gone. And they even called her lucky to not be asked to hold a criminal investigation for cheating in the Olympics, which to me is absolutely insane. Again, I personally don't think that this was a deceptive move. I don't think she was asked to stand in as a woman. She was genuinely surprised and genuinely, I'm trying to think of the right word, relieved to have this happen to her. Obviously, stripping the titles isn't that fun, but the fact of the idea of holding a criminal investigation for someone who has a genetic issue is really crazy to me. And then last but not least, I wanted just to talk about the backlash of this action. And so after this, Ratjen almost felt like she made the statement that she didn't feel like she could be a woman anymore. She felt like the Olympics had stripped her of the title of being a woman since she wasn't able to compete with them. And so she ultimately did make the transition into a male. And that is when she adopted the name Heinrich as well. As I said, many did not appreciate this change. Many of the people who personally knew her felt that she identified better and more accurately as a woman. So her own father and mother continued to call her she, her, and continue to dress her as a woman. And Dora went along with it. While she did make the transition and she asked to be called by a new name, she oftentimes was pictured still wearing women's clothes and acting like a traditional woman, according to many of the sources I read. And then, as part of her punishment, instead of avoiding that criminal investigation, she was forced to join the German labor front. And the goal of this, according to police, was to make her serve her life like a man. And if she was a man, she was going to serve like a man. So she went to the German labor front and competed in a lot of manual labor tasks, building things, tearing things down, moving rocks. She described it as one of the most labor-intensive periods of her life. So yeah, and then she disappears. So they have so much information out there about the scandal, about her transition afterwards, but after that, she just disappears. After her later life is very, very sparsely documented, and there are no later images available of her besides the one that I have pictured right here. And this is her in her older stages, and I believe now that they have passed, but this is Miss Dora Ratjen. And then the last thing I wanted to share with you is a movie that they have created about Miss Ratjen's life. It actually follows the life of a different individual, but we'll see how Miss Dora ties in right after this.
Can Jews be members of a German sports club? Nine. Now, in the United States, everyone assumes that you wouldn't take part in preparations. And I'll be frank with you, the participation of the United States depends on it. Sie wird auf jeden Fall am Wettkampf teilnehmen. She will definitely take part in the trip.
So that was a little snippet, but you can see how they have tied in Miss Dora. This is the representation of Miss Dora in this movie. And as the movie, or as it's set up, it's very clear here that in this movie they're defining it as an individual who was purposely male, placed into a women's category. But I just don't think that this is how it was supposed to go. I find it really hard to believe that that was how they imagined and how Ms. Dora took the situation. So it is up into your own interpretation, but this is my works cited page, and thank you for your time.